Cleopatra VII was the final ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which reigned over ancient Egypt. She was born in 69 or 70 BC in Alexandria, the capital of Egypt. The Ptolemaic dynasty, led by rulers of Macedonian origin, played a significant role during Egypt's Hellenistic period. Cleopatra hailed from a family that held the Egyptian throne as the last representatives of the dynasty. Her father Ptolemy II Auletes and mother Cleopatra V Tryphena were part of this lineage. As a member of a Macedonian-rooted family, Cleopatra played a pivotal role in shaping Egypt's governmental and cultural landscape. Within the Ptolemaic dynasty, marriages within the family were common. This led Cleopatra to marry her own brothers. The co-rule of Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy XIII over Egypt resulted in a history marked by conflicts and internal struggles. Cleopatra emerged as a prominent figure as the ultimate sovereign of Egypt, which stood as one of the most expansive empires in the ancient world. Her family's lineage and the lands of her birth profoundly influenced her life and the course of history. To this day, historians and archaeologists diligently study details about Cleopatra's family and birthplace. This is due to the fact that Cleopatra's narrative intersects both ancient Egyptian history and the Roman Empire. The journey of Cleopatra's rise to power unfolded against a backdrop of intricate internal intricacies and fierce political battles that define the legacy of the Ptolemaic dynasty, an imprint indelibly etched into the chronicles of ancient Egypt. In the waning days of the Ptolemaic dynasty, the struggle for the throne and the fracturing of internal allegiances were a recurrent theme. Cleopatra ascended to power after the passing of her father, Ptolemy XII Auletes. However, in accordance with Ptolemaic tradition, she shared the throne with her brother, Ptolemy XIII. This fusion of leadership paths ushered in a convoluted era for Egypt, marked by intricate power dynamics and signaling the inception of a period characterized by fierce struggles for dominance. As Cleopatra ascended to her regal position, tensions with her brother Ptolemy XIII began to mount. In response, she orchestrated a symphony of strategies to fortify her grip on the throne and seize control over Egypt's destiny. This phase was marred by internal political instability within Egypt's borders, coupled with the swelling influence of the Roman Empire. In the face of these formidable challenges, Cleopatra navigated the turbulent waters by shoring up her inner strength and deftly balancing her ties with the Roman realm. The entry of Julius Caesar into Egypt altered the tides of Cleopatra's path to the throne. What ensued was a tale of romance between Cleopatra and Caesar, blossoming into a strategic partnership aimed at amplifying Rome's political sway within Egypt. The reverberations of this alliance reverberated through the annals of both Rome and Egypt, leaving an indelible mark on their histories. Cleopatra's ascent to power was a saga, intricately woven with complex and arduous political dynamics unique to the twilight of the Ptolemaic dynasty. The joint rulership alongside her brother Ptolemy XIII mirrored the internal divides within Egypt, while her diplomatic interplay with Rome emerged as a pivotal maneuver to consolidate her reign and uphold Egypt's sovereignty. This chapter stands as a moment of monumental significance, marking Cleopatra's reign as a critical juncture in the tapestry of Egypt's history. The first encounter of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra is one of the important turning points in the history of ancient Roman and Egypt. This encounter represents the intersection of both the two great civilizations and the two influential leaders. Cleopatra's first encounter with Julius Caesar BC. It took place in 48 in Egypt. While the Roman Civil War continued during this period, Egypt was in the fights of internal conflicts and throne. Cleopatra was trying to establish relationships with Roman leaders in order to strengthen his throne and to protect Egypt against the dangers that could come from Rome. Here are the main lines of the first encounter of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. Cleopatra was born as a member of Egypt's Ptolemaic dynasty. However, he had to seek support from Rome because of the fights of internal throne and the struggle for power with his brother Ptolemy III. BC in 48, when Cleopatra learned that Julius Caesar was coming to Egypt, he took action. He returned to Egypt and came to Alexandria. Cleopatra wanted to meet Julius Caesar and attract his attention. Meeting of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. Cleopatra came to Julius Caesar and met with him. This meeting was quite impressive compared to ancient sources. Cleopatra's beauty, charisma, and intelligence is told that Caesar influences Caesar. The relationship between Julius Caesar and Cleopatra began after this first encounter. According to Plutarch, Cleopatra brought him to Rome in a large mattress and appeared next to Caesar in this mattress. This is an impressive and dramatic detail of the event. Cleopatra came to Rome next to Caesar and aroused a great impact. This led to many debates and political speculation in Rome. The relationship between Cleopatra and Caesar influenced the political balance in Rome and even affected the development of events after Julius Caesar's death. Cleopatra's relationship with Julius Caesar contained both a political and romantic strategy. Cleopatra wanted to maintain Egypt's independence and balance the influence of Rome. Caesar also aimed to get strategic advantages from this relationship. Cleopatra's support from Egypt's sources was important for Caesar. The first encounter of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra represents one of the greatest leaders in ancient history and the moment when Egypt's last Ptolemaic ruler intersected. This encounter is an important turning point that reflects Cleopatra's efforts to increase its own power and the effects of the Roman Empire. After Julius Caesar's death, the death of Julius Caesar is considered a great event and turning point in the history of ancient Roman. Caesar's death led to significant changes in the political and social structure of the Roman Empire. Here is a broad statement about the death of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar BC. On March 15, 44, the assassination of the Roman Senate was killed. This took place on history known as Ides of March. Caesar had an increasing power in the Roman Republic, which disturbed some senators. Those who wanted to return to the traditional republic values and the old political structure of Rome wanted to limit or end Caesar's power. Julius Caesar, a battle commander and a famous leader, was seen as a threat to the Senate. A group of senators decided to conspire against him. BC, on March 15, 44, the assassins gathered at the Curia of Pompey in the Roman Senate, stabbed Julius Caesar to kill. Famous "Me too, Brute," "You too, Brutus." The expression shows that Marcus Brutus, who was among the close friends of Caesar and the assassins, also betrays. The murder of Julius Caesar caused great complexity and chaos in Rome. Caesar's death triggered the collapse of the Roman Republic and led to the birth of the Roman Empire. After his death, the struggles of power in Rome began. Caesar's close friends and supporters entered into conflict with the assassins. Julius Caesar's nephew and adopted Gaius Octavius, later Augustus, after Caesar's death, took action to protect and take over his legacy. Octavian fought against the assassins as one of Caesar's supporters. This led to the Second Civil War. The death of Julius Caesar is one of the events that influenced the future of the Roman Empire and represents an important turning point in the history of Roman. This was the beginning of a complex period that prepared the ground for the instability of Rome and the evolution of the Roman Empire. Cleopatra returned to Egypt and tried to maintain its power by taking advantage of the civil wars of Rome. A relationship developed between Cleopatra and Mark Antony, both romantic and political. This relationship enabled Cleopatra to get involved in Roman politics. The first meeting and beginning of Cleopatra and Mark Antony's relationship is an important event in the history of ancient Rome and Egypt. This encounter between the two symbolizes both a romantic attraction and the beginning of a political alliance. Here are the details of the first meeting and beginning of Cleopatra and Mark Antony's relationship. The ways of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, BC. It crossed in the city of Tarsus in 41. Mark Antony was traveling to the east after the Roman civil wars. As Queen of Egypt, Cleopatra was an important leader and ruler of the east. She wanted to associate herself with an important Roman leader, The arrival of Cleopatra on her way to Tarsus took place with great splendor and magnificence. Aboard a golden ship, she drew attention by coming in Egyptian-style luxury and grandeur. This impressive arrival of Cleopatra made a great impression on and intrigued Mark Antony. Cleopatra was described as a highly intelligent, cultured, and charismatic leader. Her personality and beauty impressed Mark Antony. Mark Antony's interest in Cleopatra was shaped by both romantic and political reasons. The duo was trying to forge a strong alliance between Rome and Egypt, while also being romantically linked to each other. The meeting of Cleopatra and Mark Antony marked the beginning of a strong romantic relationship between the two. This relationship also served Cleopatra's political interests and Egypt's security. Mark Antony's relationship with Cleopatra became a major point of contention in Rome. Antony's devotion to Cleopatra adversely affected his prestige and career in Rome. The relationship of Cleopatra and Mark Antony was the subject of great debate and criticism in Roman society. The Roman people and Senate criticized Antony's love and devotion to the Egyptian queen. Antony's decisions for Cleopatra in Rome damaged his prestige in Rome. The first meeting of Cleopatra and Mark Antony in Tarsus started one of the most famous romantic stories of the ancient world. This meeting was an important turning point that affected both personal emotional ties and political power balances. The relationship between the two deeply affected both their own lives and the history of the Roman Empire. The Battle of Actium is an important battle that represents a major turning point in ancient Roman history and shaped the future of the Roman Empire. This battle took place between Egypt and the Roman Empire, where Cleopatra and Mark Antony took sides. Here are the details of the Battle of Actium and its aftermath. The Battle of Actium was a major naval battle between Egypt, where Cleopatra and Mark Antony took sides, and the Roman Empire led by Octavian, later Augustus. The war strategies of both sides were evaluated separately. The purpose of Mark Antony and Cleopatra was to counter the Roman advance of the West. Therefore, they gathered a combined navy and army from Egypt. Cleopatra's finances and maritime knowledge were at the center of this strategy. Before the battle, large and magnificent ships were built. There was speculation that Mark Antony was planning to cross to the west by winning a naval battle. However, in order to gather more support and troops, Cleopatra had to return to Egypt. Octavian aimed to weaken the alliance of Cleopatra and Mark Antony in Egypt and take over Egypt. Octavian aimed to weaken Cleopatra and Mark Antony with his land army as well as the war at sea. For this reason, he also prepared the land army. In the pre-battle period, Octavian moved towards Egypt to gather support. Before the battle, he waited for the enemy fleet to disperse. BC on September 2, 31, the battle began in the Bay of Actium. The navy of Cleopatra and Mark Antony encountered the navy under Octavian's command. The course of the battle was determined by the weakening of Cleopatra's navy due to domestic unrest and strategic mistakes. Mark Antony's navy was disbanded. At the end of the battle, Octavian's navy won a great victory. Cleopatra and Mark Antony tried to flee the battlefield. After the battle, Cleopatra and Mark Antony withdrew to Egypt. However, Octavian besieged Egypt. As a result of the Battle of Actium, Octavian, Augustus, remained the sole leader of the Roman Empire, and Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. This battle was an important turning point that changed the course of history and shaped the future of the Roman Empire. The death of Cleopatra is one of the most famous and tragic events in the history of ancient Egypt and Rome. This event represents both Cleopatra's personal tragedy and the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt. Here is a broad account of Cleopatra's death. Cleopatra BC. He withdrew to Egypt after the Battle of Actium in 30 BC. Cleopatra and Mark Antony, defeated as a result of the battle, fled towards Egypt. However, Octavian, later Augustus, began to besiege Egypt. Cleopatra and Mark Antony wanted to prevent Octavian from being taken prisoner and die with dignity. Cleopatra did not want Egypt to fall into Octavian's hands. Therefore, when she learned that Octavian was approaching Egypt, she decided to commit suicide in desperation. Although there are several different stories about the method of Cleopatra's suicide, the most common version is that Cleopatra committed suicide after being bitten by a deadly snake. the Egyptian cobra. As part of Egyptian mythology and symbols, Cleopatra believed that being bitten by a cobra ritually symbolized her death. It was also believed that dying by this method was quick and relatively painless. After Cleopatra's suicide, Mark Antony also took his own life. Immediately after Cleopatra's death, Mark chose to go to Antony and die with her. Mark Antony committed suicide by stabbing himself with his sword. Before he died, he wanted to go to Cleopatra and be with her. Cleopatra's death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the fall of Egypt under the rule of the Roman Empire. The deaths of Cleopatra and Mark Antony represent the tragic end of one of the ancient world's most famous love stories. These events greatly influenced the history of both the Roman Empire and Egypt. Cleopatra's death symbolizes the end of a life full of beauty, splendor, and passion. This tragic event reflects the end of one of the most powerful female leaders of antiquity and the expansion of the Roman Empire to the east.